Court Schuyler asked, why do plateaus happen?
Many reasons. Are we talking fat loss plateaus?
I think we could go specific fat loss. We could also just go more broad, general, why they happen. I mean, I'm happy to go any direction you want. I have in my mind the more broad. If you want to go specific, do that.
We can go more broad. I would say that the reason at a high level that most plateaus happen is lack of adherence over time, which is probably an unpopular answer. Like a lot of people are probably thinking metabolic slowdown. A lot of people are thinking, needing to adjust calories. Many people who see great progress when starting a fitness program and then eventually hit a plateau were very adherent for their first 8, 12, 16 weeks on that fitness program, especially fat loss related. But it's hard to keep that same level of intensity and consistency and adherence over the long run. And so if someone potentially was in a little bit too big of a deficit that isn't sustainable forever, but is for a period of time, motivation's high, they just started paying for a service, so they don't want to be wasting their money. And they saw amazing progress in their first 3 months and then have started to plateau over months 4, 5, 6. The answer is probably looking at the adherence of that individual in their first 3 months compared to their months 4 through 6, rather than something technical like, oh, you were on 2250 calories and now we just need to reduce that amount for you to continue seeing fat loss progress.
I think there's something you said there. There's something specific you mentioned that most people will overlook and not understand. And I'm going to give people an opportunity before I say it. Just think about what Mike just said, maybe even rewind it, and guess what I'm about to pinpoint Mike just said that makes this so unique and specific to plateaus. I'm going to give you 1 second. If you want to think about it, rewind it. What Mike just said, I'm going to give you the answer now. So if you want to think about it for a second, pause. What Mike just said for a plateau is he specified months 4, 5, and 6 as a plateau. This is very smart, and it's so important because he didn't say 3 days. He didn't say 7 days. He didn't say 2 weeks. He said months 4, 5, and 6 at a plateau. And that, for me, is the most important part, because my answer was going to be that when plateaus happen because they're normal. And I was thinking of the time frame of 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, 2 weeks. You were thinking of a legitimate plateau, not what people think it is, but what it actually is, because you're an ISTJ. So
true.
You're like, no, an actual plateau is months of no movement. And I think it actually they both go together really well. Because if you have someone who thinks a plateau is 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, and then they don't see movement for 7 days, even though that's normal, well, then they're no longer going to be consistent or adherent to it because they think it's not working. So then that elongates the plateau and actually becomes a legitimate plateau because they're not being adherent. Mm-hmm. But if over that 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, 20-day time period where they weren't seeing progress, if they had stayed consistent, there would have eventually been movement. They wouldn't be in a plateau anymore for 3 months straight. I think that the major issue is they think a plateau shouldn't last 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, 20 days, but it does. That's normal, even if you're being 100% consistent. 3 months? No. That if over 2-3 months, you're going to see movement. The longest plateau I've ever really seen, whether it's fat loss or strength or really whatever, the longest is somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. And that's for someone who I know is being 100% consistent. They're not bullshitting. And that's also someone who's at a very high level. Someone who is like very high level. They're very lean. They're very strong. They're not making any progress. For most people who are not at a high level, they're not very lean. They're not a high level of fitness. They're not a high level athlete. Generally plateaus 3 to 4 weeks at most, and then you'll notice as long as you're staying consistent, you'll see movement. But that's like at most. So yeah, I think that's the perfect combination of answers.
Yeah. And it's such a good point that 3 days isn't a plateau. 5 days isn't a plateau. Like, getting comfortable looking at 7-day moving averages with scale weight, understanding that rate of progress is going to slow down over time, understanding that the leaner you get, the harder it is to lose more body fat. If you're 300 plus pounds and it's been 3 weeks and the scale hasn't moved at all and you are 100% adherent, then we need to look deeper at adherence. We need to look at hunger levels, look at where your calories are relative to what your estimated TDEE is. And there may be a reason to reduce calories in that specific situation. But for someone who is more advanced, scale weight can be in the same range for a number of weeks, and it doesn't necessarily mean that anything needs to change.
Yeah, that's exactly right.